And former Governor Hogan joins us now. Governor Hogan, thanks for being here. There were a lot of Republicans who were hopeful that you would get into the race, that you represented the style of republicanism and conservatism that they used to know and hope would come back someday. So how did you make the decision not to get in?
Well, it was a difficult decision. I put a lot of thought into it, but part of it was what you were just discussing there a moment ago. I've been saying for years that successful politics is about addition and multiplication, not subtraction and division. And the party's been doing an awful lot of subtracting and dividing. And I've been just the opposite in my approach. I was elected and reelected in the bluest state in America by winning nearly all the Republicans and all the independents and a big chunk of Democrats by focusing on things that people cared about and focusing on competency and common sense. And that's what's missing in politics today. But there's the party has, sort of gone off the rails and in a different direction. And it was a crowded field, and I did not want to just be part of a multi-car pileup trying to reach those, what I call the Republican wing of the Republican Party. So I didn't really need elective office, and I didn't see a clear path when you had multiple people trying to merge into the same lane.
You've said in the past, Governor, that you do still believe that the party is redeemable, that it can return to Reaganism or the era of perhaps George H.W. Bush in small government conservatism and everything else that comes with that. How do you see that? If you look at CPAC, if you look at the way that other people like Ron DeSantis, who may get into the race, how they've been talking about culture wars and everything else, how do you see this party returning to what you believe it still can be?
Well, I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can, although I'm not sure how fast it's going to happen. I'm going to continue to try to fight in that direction because I think it's important for the party and for the country for us to have a competitive two-party system that debates issues. A CPAC, as you were pointing out, it was half empty. Most of the serious potential candidates did not attend. And, people are focused on other things, but there's no question that Trump and Trumpism is a huge chunk of the Republican Party. But we're a long ways off. We're having kind of a battle for the heart and soul of the party. And the first primaries are more than a year away. And so we'll see. It's going to be a long fight. And I'm going to continue to be a voice and continue to be involved in any way I can to help get us back on track.
So, Governor Hogan, you have said that you're optimistic about the future of the Republican Party, though certainly worried about its present. But speaking of an election just a year or so away, you're not going to be part of the field. But as you survey it, is there a candidate or two who represents what you think the Republican Party would be? Is there someone there who is declared, or not just yet, but expected to jump in, who you would feel like could take the party where you think its future should be?
Well, I think we have a number of talented people in the party. Right now, we have hardly anybody in the race, and we're not sure who's going to end up actually running. But I believe that we have a lot of talent. I think some of them are governors and former governors who actually have some leadership experience in running an executive branch. But I think it's far too early. If you look back in past elections, like, say, in 2015, Donald Trump was at less than 1%, and Jeb Bush was the leader. And, we were talking about Scott Walker and Rick Perry and, Tim Pawlenty, all these guys a year out that we thought were going to be the only ones we're going to hear from. Other people popped up, and I'm hopeful that some of the folks are going to that's why we have these primaries. There's no coronation, and everybody's got to get out there and leave it all on the field and let people know what they're about. But I think there's a whole host of potential people that could do a great job representing us.
So, Governor, we'd ask you to put your strategist hat on here. Your Republican Party right now, a huge percentage of it is captivated with religious fervor to one particular candidate. And when it comes to candidates, you have probably a majority of mentioned candidates thus far who are captured by the fear of attacking that particular candidate. What do you do about the people who actually vote?
Right. Well, I think there's a cult of personality is not good for the party, and it's been a big part of our problem. But the positive news is it is changing slowly. So Trump went from about 90% support in Republican primary voters. After January 6th, it came down to about 60%, and now he's down to about 30-some%. And I was the only one speaking out and saying these things for several years. But now many of the potential candidates and many other people in the party are starting to have the courage to stand up and say exactly, talk about the truth, and are willing to push back. So hopefully that will continue, and we'll continue to see him diminish, and we'll maybe hopefully get the party back on track.
Joe, it's true that some Republicans are stepping forward and pushing back on Donald Trump, just no one who's running against him at the moment.
No, and the governor, thing that I just don't get about the Republican Party is they don't like winners. I mean, you look at the most popular. No, I'm serious. You look at the most popular and successful governors in America. I mean, your approval rating in Maryland in the 70s. Chris Sununu in New Hampshire in the 70s. Charlie Baker had approval rating in the 70s, and the yahoos in that party ran him out of politics. You got a Vermont governor that's got approval rating in the 80s. There is a way, Phil Scott, there is a way forward for Republicans. You've shown the way. Other people have shown the way, and it has nothing to do with being divisive. It has nothing to do with woke wars. It has nothing to do with trying to find the most divisive issues out there. Talk about that, and talk about how crazy it is that you've got all these Republican governors with approval ratings in the 70s and 80s, and nobody nationally is interested.
Well, you make an excellent point. And look, I'm leaving the bluest state in the country with a very high approval rating, because people liked it when we focused on solving issues, when we talked about reaching across the aisle and working together to find compromise and to get things done. It's what most Americans are looking for, regardless of their party affiliation. Unfortunately, Donald Trump said we're going to be winning so much, we're going to get tired of winning. But all we've done is lose. Again and again, we've lost really in the last 3 election cycles, and I'm not sure how many times you have to beat your head against the wall to realize that doubling down on failure is not, the roadmap to success. And this is something that I've been focused on for years. It's what I talked about right after the 2020 election at the Reagan Institute. It's what I keep saying every time I'm talking with leaders in the party. We've got to have a hopeful, positive message that appeals to a broader audience, or else we don't get to govern. And then, the Democrats are going to be in control of everything. And so I think they're so focused on playing to the base that they're hurting themselves in a general election.
Yeah, and Governor,
absolutely.
Again, like you said, you've shown the way in the bluest state in America for a Republican to win. We talked about up and down the eastern seaboard, Republicans doing extraordinarily well. That begs a much larger question, and that is the question of whether an independent candidate, not tied to the Republican base or the Democratic base, whether at some point soon in America an independent candidate could get elected president of the United States.
Well, it's an interesting question. I mean, obviously, it's not really happened, before, but we're at a unique point in time where people are leaving both the Republican and Democratic Party and becoming independent, and in record numbers in nearly every state. And I think, you see about 70% of what I call the exhausted majority that are sort of fed up with politics and both parties, and they really hate the divisive, angry rhetoric and the toxic politics and the fact that nothing gets done. So it's certainly, I don't see it at this point in time, but it's not completely outside of the realm of possibility.
Former Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.
Thank you, Governor.
So